Also, is it Amy? More angels. They told me I could see vision.
This is a sound test. Jeanette, you were wondering if you could hear us. Hopefully you can hear me now talking. So Brendan, I've just promoted you to panelist. Hopefully you're the right Brendan.
Yes, Brian, it's me. I don't think there are other ones yet.
Excellent. Yeah, so you should be able to turn your video on as well. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, just snapped it on.
Yeah. There we go.
Brian, do you know if Pam's unmuted or?
She's currently muted at the moment, but we,
All
yeah,
right,
we
so
should
I don't
can double
know.
check if we're. Go ahead.
How
There.
quickly she wants to get underway.
I'm sitting here ready whenever you are.
Okay, so I'm seeing 50 participants. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. So to introduce myself, I'm Brendan Mulroy, Vice President of the Field Naturalists. And it's my pleasure to act partly as host for this evening. So I'll begin with our statement of reconciliation. We gather from our various sites on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe peoples and seek to be guided by the Great Spirit in lives of love, wisdom, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. Sorry, I had to wing it there. I just could not read the statement on the camera. As far as club business goes, there's really only one announcement for tonight, and that's to remind membership that we have 2 directors who will be completing their terms by June annual meeting, and we have a vacancy of the director for the stewardship program. So we would love to hear from anyone who would like to join the board of directors or would like to nominate someone. Having said that, I will fade out and I'll let Pam zoom in with her much anticipated presentation. So take it away, Pam.
Okay, thank you. Now, all I have to do is make sure I get everything right, and we're on our way. So I hope everyone can see that. This is kind of the beginning of my presentation. It's a beautiful picture of part of the Serengeti right here. And the only reason I ever decided to go to Africa was I was a member of the Huron Birding Festival and was over there the night that they did the silent auctions. And for a very small bid, I won quite a substantial gift certificate from Worldwide Quest. And that kind of put me on the map to start looking at places to be able to decide where I wanted to go, whether I wanted a cultural tour or an animal tour. And because of what my husband wanted, a long time ago, I decided that I would do the animal tour and see the big 5. So my trip to Africa started on February the 18th. And for it lasted 3 weeks. And I returned home on March the 9th. And that was just as COVID was shutting down the world. I think it was March the 11th that everything shut down. So I just squeaked in. And the other thing that I want to say just at this point in time too, so many of you as our members are such experts on everything, but remember, I was here as a tourist. I'm not an expert on anything. So take it easy on the questions for me. So I'm calling this Tanzania the culture of Maasai and lions because to me, that's how it felt. I read plenty about this continent long before I had ever decided to go to Africa, mostly a lot of Egyptian things, but I read authors like Wilbur Smith, who wrote The River God and the Courtney series and The Quest. And I read a lot about Pauline Gedge, and she was a favorite of mine, and reading The Child of the Morning and King's Men. And then the last author that I read just before I came on this trip was Peter Hathaway Capstick. And he was a very renowned big game hunter and an author. And I will be quoting some of his work throughout. It was his words that gave me the reverence to look at these animals in their own right, not as detached objects just seen on TV or in a zoo. Also, having watched countless BBC and National Geographic programs has made the present experience so surreal, to be in a place that I've come to know so well through learning on TV. But now breathing in the air and the smells, feeling the wind and hearing everything around me makes this a reality. The only trouble is that I have to keep quieting all the commentary done by David Attenborough that's going on in my head. As you can see, this was a dream of my late husband, was to go see the Big Five. He actually began dreaming about it, going with a gun, but then quickly decided no, he just wanted to see it before it was all gone. And that's kind of how I felt too. So the Big Five are lion, rhino, elephant, Cape buffalo, and leopard. And these are considered the most dangerous animals in Africa. A little bit about Tanzania. It's the largest country in East Africa. It's bordered by Kenya and Uganda to the north, Mozambique, Zambia, and Malawi to the south, also sharing borders with Burundi, the Congo, Republic of Congo, and Rwanda. This country also includes the islands of Zanzibar and Pemba and Mafia. It's dominated by Mount Kilimanjaro at 19,340 feet and Mount Muru, which is 14,978 feet. And those were exactly in the area that I was, and where you could see practically the whole time you were in the Serengeti, you could see those volcanic mountains. The people that live there, their religion, 1/3 of them are Christian, 1/3 are Muslim, and 1/3 are the traditional, according to the religions of their tribe. It's 600 feet above sea level. 30% is a national parkland, which you'll see on the map next. That's a huge amount of that country being in parkland. Population is about 58 million. The official languages are Swahili, or Kiswahili is how you really should say it, and English, and the currency is a shilling. And today, the Canadian dollar is worth 86 shillings, or 1 shilling is equal to 12 cents. And the smallest note that you can get there in bill form is 10,000 shillings. However, they do prefer and sometimes demand only American dollars. So those 10,000 shillings are about $91 in American. There's the maps. You can see that I was very close to Lake Victoria, but it looks close, but it was about 200 kilometers away. You can see how big the Serengeti Plain is. It's absolutely huge. Ngorongoro Conservation Area, it was difficult sometimes to tell exactly where we were, but I flew into Mount Kilimanjaro Airport, as you can see here. And then we were right around the town of Arusha. And from there, we came down to Arusha National Park, down into Tarangire, and then up to the Ngorongoro crater, across to the Serengeti, and then flew back to Arusha. And most everybody went home from there except for me. This is the lodge that I came to when I first got there. After traveling from Kilimanjaro Airport on some paved roads and turning very quickly onto dirt roads, and that's pretty much what everything was other than the main roads, I came to this gated, walled property. Once we came through the gates, it was total opulence within the walls compared to what was on the outside. After 24 hours of travel, I was astounded when I got there and walking down to my little individual cottage, the lushness of all the plants that we only really see as house plants. So this actually was an empty street when we drove through. You can see the driver there where we were going through that road. When we drove to the hotel, everything was empty. There wasn't hardly any people there at all. But then suddenly the next day it was thronged with people sitting on the side or not so on the side, setting up their stalls of just about anything. Shaba was my guide, and with very strict instructions, I was to stay within an arm's length behind him, never in front of him. He actually put his arm out and touched my shoulder so that I knew what length I was to be behind him. He was fantastic with all the people there, being able to answer all my questions and then turn to the people and talk to them in Swahili, and then come back and tell me what was being said. And you might want to notice that woman there holding the bunch of bananas in the middle. I actually was going to try that, but I'll show you in the next slide how big they are. So within this throng of people, I was following Shaba very carefully and watching where I was walking very carefully. And then all of a sudden, in my very close personal space, this very tall, fierce looking man dressed all in red was standing directly in front of me, shouting something at me, holding a little tiny plastic bottle, shaking it with this thick viscous fluid in it and saying something to me that I didn't have a clue. And so I was standing there, just kept saying, no, no. And Shaba realized that I wasn't right behind him, and he came running back, quickly spoke to the man and took him away from me. And to my surprise, he bought what the man was selling. So apparently it was wild acacia honey that the Maasai gather and sell. And if I had realized what it was, then I would have bought it. It did, and Shaba did give me a taste. It was very strong floral taste, slightly bitter aftertaste once you got over the sweet. Going into the spot where I was going to get my tanzanite, because I had arrived a day early, they had asked me what it was that I wanted from this trip. And I told them, me being a foodie, I wanted to go to a market, a local market, not one that was for tourists. And I wanted tanzanite, but we'll get to that. So as we were driving, a lot of the roads that were paved, there was division in between them. And the homes and shops, a lot of these were shops along the way. They're randomly placed, like they're not clustered into a common area like we see in a village. It often takes many years for them to complete these cement block houses because they're so expensive. People will cobble up a roof, and mostly with tin sheeting, and live there anyway so that there's no squatters or vandalism. Many of the places are backed with fields of coffee plantations and banana plantations, like you can see in that one. So as I was talking about the bunches of bananas, I was so curious because I saw so many women carrying these things on their heads. So I asked this lady if I could pick one up, and she looked at me and laughed. And I thought, okay. Anyways, I picked one up. It was about 50 pounds, and they were carrying them on their heads. And the other thing I saw quite a lot of, obviously, was the shoes that you can see there. Those were all Crocs. But many of the people had very small quantities of things that they were selling. Small little piles of onions and carrots. There was gallons of cooking oil. There was piles of oranges, and they certainly don't look like our oranges. They're green, and they're kind of a goldy color inside, but fully ripe. Clothing, fabric, pretty much anything. And like I said, a lot of it was not huge quantities. Well, there were at least 45 stalls covering around a square acre with nothing but shoes. Ever wonder where all your donated shoes go to? Well, I can tell you where, and in this heat, they sure do stink. I had asked about street food. Shaba was quite surprised that I would ask about street food because, being a tourist, usually we don't think that we want to eat what everybody else is eating. But I said, no, I really did want to. So I asked about the street vendors. He took me to the one that he often would go to. And rather back from the main part of the road, this woman's stall was cordoned off with tarps. You were instructed to wash your hands from a very meager kettle of water and then rinse bucket before you could even enter her stall. Then you were served this plate of screaming hot polenta. That's the white stuff in the pot that you're seeing there, and spinach and fish stew. No utensils at all. You were to gather your polenta, which was burning my fingers, gather it up into a little bit and kind of use it as a scoop to pick up anything else. The green that you see there is what they were calling spinach. It actually is taro leaves that are about 2 feet across that they cut up very finely with onions, and it was delicious, and it did taste like spinach. There was okra on the plate also, which I absolutely detest. Can you hold up on it? And I'm just going to see if I can get my cursor here. Oh, there it is. That was the okra that I don't like. And then this pile was the pile of fish. And it was stewed with onions and lemon and I think garlic, but I'm not sure. Anyways, I wanted to show you how little these fish were. There's an eye right there. So if you can see how tiny they were, there was at least in that scoopful 250 or so, and they were quite delicious and salty, but they were quite delicious. So as I have on the bottom there, maybe the Tanzanite can wait a little bit till I was finished having this to eat. This is actually the lady that's standing there ended up being my roommate for the trip. And we had come up into a tourist area that had a building there that was selling lots of things. And this is actually where I was going to get my Tanzanite. I'm going to play a short little clip of what you often found in front of the tourist place, but hang on to your seats. It'll probably be a little loud. You can see they're all traditional instruments. This one guy here, it just looked like a bread pan to me. This was just outside of the museum too, of all these artists. And this display here, at first, I honestly thought those were people sitting there, but they're all statues. And it's of a typical Maasai village sitting around a fire. And these over here, very bizarre, but all the animals were sitting like in a human position. At last, my Tanzanite. I don't need to tell you how much I paid for these, but they are essentially blue diamonds specific to Tanzania. At the wholesale dealer, he had pieces as big as diamonds. as big as almonds. I quickly had to tell him to put those away because they were very much more money than what I could spend. By the end of the viewing, he had put trays and trays of these beautiful cut gems, just dumped them out in front of me on the counter. There was about $6 million worth on the counter right in front of me. And we don't need to convert that into shillings. I was given a certificate of authenticity, as well as a certificate of sale and the size and weight, or carat weight. This was all for customs if needed. Also surprising to me, I was given a bill of sale that was much less than what I had actually paid. And he told me that was because I could spend more money then and I wouldn't have to claim as much. This was all right around the Jane Goodall Museum and Art Gallery. And most of you, I'm sure, know Jane Goodall. I think this building was built around 2015. It was started by her because she believed that artists needed to be recognized for their talent and the talent that they had, and was built for the artists to sell their wares at fair prices and a place to give value and recognition to the great worth of the pieces created. The masks here on the left are a huge part of the native African culture. Some of the ones on that board particularly are thousands of years old, but some of the pieces are on loan to the museum from tribes because they're still being used in their culture. Some of them were new though. The costume on the right is a bride's costume. It was extremely heavy and very stiff. They did allow me to touch it. It was woven with different types of cloth, but also parts of grass. And it was very thick and very dense. And she had to wear this. It was part of their culture that she wore this to dance before her ceremony to show her devotion, respect, and fertility. These are actually what we would consider chairs, but they're actually thrones. They did allow me to sit in one, and I think it was the elephant one that I sat in, but definitely not made for short people. It was like trying to watch me get out of an Adirondack chair. My daughter's sitting here laughing at me. That zebra was absolutely gorgeous, made of brass. It was beautiful. And the figures to the right are all made of hand forged nails. And I did watch a man make some of those nails. So if you can imagine the time and effort that it took to do that. So now we're in Arusha, and around my walled haven that I was in, there is a tract that was mostly used by cattle carts and foot traffic, but some vehicles were there too. The track was along the shore of Lake Duluti, and that name was also in the name of our hotel. Our guide was a young conservation officer from Arusha National Park, and I was thrilled to see so many species. So this silvery-cheeked hornbill, they are extremely loud. They start very early in the morning. It was their mating season at the time, so there was a ton of them in trees all over us. They were flying everywhere around when you were sitting outside eating or anything. Now we're heading into Arusha National Park, a very peaceful and diverse place dominated by Mount Meru. It's M-E-R-U. And we were able to see some of the big animal species as well as some less likely to see elsewhere. The colobus monkey, the Sykes monkey or blue monkey, and the bushbuck. This grassland is dotted with lakes holding a variety of water birds and specialities such as longclaws and cisticolas. Those are both birds. The forests were of mahogany, fig, cedar, and wild mango. We were also lucky, or if we were lucky, we would be able to see the snow-clad peak of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the highest in Africa at 6,345 meters. Actually, my oldest son, the year or two before that, had climbed Kilimanjaro to the summit. It took him 10 days, 8 days to reach the summit, and then 2 days to get back down. And I have pictures of him above the clouds. This was one of the women's hens that I was with, but this is a giant millipede, so you can see how huge it is. Cinnamon crested bee eater. The bee eaters, there's many, many types. And I had bought a bird book because that's one of my passions is to bird. So it was quite interesting to see these birds. They're quite beautiful and in every color you can imagine. The water buck on this side, obviously a giraffe there. And you can see on the back of the giraffe's neck is a yellow-billed oxpecker. Olive baboons. The Maasai giraffe, we saw many, many of them. They're quite elegant, beautiful creatures. This is a black and white colobus monkey. And you can see how long and silky their fur looks, but oh my goodness, did they ever smell bad. Sort of a cross between manure and bad socks. but maybe it was appealing to them, obviously. Variable sunbird, many, many types of them also. Front and back shot. Oh, and by the way, I should tell you this. I did not buy a new camera. I was going to before I went to Africa, but what I actually did was went and bought an iPhone 11. So all these shots, most of them, probably about 85% of all the pictures you're going to see, I shot with an iPhone. The other pictures are courtesy of Glenn Barrett. He was the president in the Hamilton Field Naturalist Club, but he was our group leader, and he had a camera with a beautiful zoom lens on it. These giraffe, we did notice them standing up on the hill. They were very far away from us actually, but that was a zoom on my iPhone. Anyways, as we drove past them, they were still there, and we just happened, a couple of us turned around and they're loping down that hill onto the road. It was a beautiful sight. This is kind of the first little video that I saw, and I was thrilled to see these Cape buffalo. They look like docile cattle, but never take your eyes off them. You will also see the common waterbuck. The white marking on its rump is distinguishes them from the Defasa waterbuck. And my guides told me to look for the McDonald's sign. And I kind of shook my head and I said, what do you mean the McDonald's sign? But when the butt turns around, it looks like a big M. So they laughed about that. So this is a very short video. I have taken the sound out of it because it was just a lot of wind. So in part of the Arusha Park, like I had said, there's a lot of freshwater lakes. So we're seeing a lot of bird life and a lot of water bird life too. We saw a lot of lesser and greater flamingos, some much darker pink, meaning that they had feasted on many more brine shrimp in another spot. These birds were, like I said, in fresh water, not in the alkaline lakes that they like to breed in. This is a Vervet monkey. This is a mom and baby, but much to our guide and our group leader who happened to be with us that day, they were quite blushing when we saw them. On our truck that day, it was all women, and we made them blush because of the discussion, very frank discussion actually, about the colorful genitals of these males, because they were very prominent and they were bright blue and red. Beautiful wee birds that we only ever see in cages. This is one of our guides coming up, driving us past another market. Like I said, it's always a surprise in the roadside market. You never know what you're going to see. Like, how many times would you think that you would see beds for sale in a roadside market alongside bananas? This was, I had zoomed this picture in quite a bit. This is actually a Maasai town. They consider their villages towns if there's more than 5 or 6 huts in it. And you can see that some of these huts are traditional, but there are a few there that have a tin roof on them, and the goats in the foreground. Lovely little birds. We saw them everywhere with all the nests in the trees. And look at the size of the thorns. Many, many, many elephants. This spotted hyena even though we were promised we would see tons of them, we really didn't see very many. And this guy was loping along the road in front of us, ran in front of us for at least 3/4 of a mile. It was extremely fast and not the least concerned that we were on its tail. There were many lions in this area, but a lot of them had just eaten. So there was lots of scavenging for the hyenas to do, but they are a ferocious predator in their own right. And they're very much bigger than you think. They're at least 3 feet or 92 centimeters at the shoulder. These little guys, we did see many different types of them, but the sand grouse usually nest way out in the very, very dry areas and have to come in to water. It's usually the males that come into the water, soak up their water with their breast feathers and fly back to their brood, and that's the water that they get then. Rock monitor lizard, we did see a few of those. These lilac-breasted rollers, they're gorgeous birds. They're kind of shaped funny. Look at how big their head is, but absolutely beautiful birds. And we saw them all over the grasslands. They're called rollers because of the rolling flight displays, especially diving from a height to catch their prey. These little guys, dwarf mongoose, we saw them fairly often, and also saw the banded mongoose, and they tackle large insects and rodents and amphibians, but they love to eat snakes. And that is one thing I never saw the whole trip. I never saw one snake. Now we're heading to Tarangire. These are impala, and we did see a lot of impala. Tarangire is a unique intersection between short grass plains to the north and the thick Mambo belt to the south. Tarangire is a special refuge for mammals such as the lesser kudu and very rich in bird life. Tarangire boasts many types of lands, including grasslands, floodplains, woodlands, and rocky outcrops. We stayed at the Adventure Aloft balloon camp when we were there. There is a picture of it a little bit. It was available to rent an air balloon to drift over the park, which we all wanted to do, but it was extremely highly priced, way too much for this traveler. And they also wouldn't allow us to split anything to go up for lesser time, so none of us went. Gray-crowned crane, say that 3 times fast. We were very lucky to see these elegant birds though, and they stand about 40 inches high. Now, any of you botanist people out there like David? I have no idea what this was. Our guides argued about it. My group leader wasn't exactly sure. It sort of looks like the pea family. I wasn't sure what it was. We went through many books and couldn't find out. So if anybody has an idea, I'd love to know. Impala. Like I said, we saw so many giraffe and that huge baobab tree in the background. Now, elephants. We did see very, very many elephants. And like I had promised you, I was going to quote to you some of the words that I had read from Capstick before I had come here. And remember, he's a hunter. So the elephant. It's always amazed me how something as god-awful big as a bull elephant can be so hard to spot in cover. Possibly it's the optical phenomenon of the very size not offering a recognizable view of the whole animal when his silhouette is broken even by light bush. A wild African elephant, in comparison to the zoo type used to people, have about as much in common as a croc and a chameleon. Nothing but nothing is as overwhelmingly attention-getting as an elephant that has just decided he doesn't like you. And nothing in the animal world is better equipped to do something about it. These little guys, they were so sweet. We did see quite a few. And as you can see here, this one, if I can find my cursor. There it is. This guy was the male. This one back here is the female, and this was their little one. And it is true, all our guides told us that the dik-dik mate for life, and if one of the pair dies, the other one will die within 3 months. This bird was absolutely everywhere. It's sitting on this big termite mound. There's the red spur fowl, which this one is, but there's also a yellow spur fowl. And one of the women in our group, who actually was quite a terrific birder from the GTA area, she could not remember the name of these things, so she just called them chickens. A hammercock. This was one of the birds I really, really wanted to see. It's one of the most unusual birds and not plentiful in very many areas. It's always near water, and it will even follow the rains to be near all the big puddles. This bird is a monotypic family restricted only to Africa. It's considered either magical or an ill omen, and is often persecuted. And he has a tendency to be totally unafraid of man. Some of the beautiful flowers that we'd seen. Because of the timing that we were there, we were just on the cusp of the rainy season, so there was a lot of blooming going on. Beautiful. No, you can tell that's me in the straw hat. The guys with the big cameras, I just wanted to see whatever it was we were looking at. You can see why this is named after the guinea fowl with the coloring. This little guy was just on the side of the road. Here's the Aloft balloon camp. You can see we were thinking we were going to be in tents. Well, it was sort of a tent, but really not very much. But you can see how elegant it was. But honestly, it was on top of this big rise, but was totally surrounded by bush. It was full of Cape buffalo, elephants. There was lions all over. We had to flash a flashlight out the bedroom window in order to signal our escorts, which were Maasai warriors, to take us to the dining room for our dinner. We were not allowed out at night, even just to sit on our deck. That was an absolute no-no. Rightly so, because when I went to breakfast the next morning, there was fresh platter-sized footprints on the path, and the lions had been roaring all night. So the platter-sized footprints, I'm sure you know they were elephant. We did go on a night excursion, which was kind of freaky actually, but it was pretty cool. So we did see the African hare, and I know that shot of the spring hare is quite blurry, but we were lucky to even see it at all. They're very elusive creatures, and we didn't get to see hardly anything of them at all. We did see some owls that night. Elephant, we could hear the little bit of rumbling. They were extremely difficult to see, and they were only about 100 yards away from us, a herd of about 25. So that was kind of freaky too. And I did see a civet that night, but it was hidden enough in the branches you could see it with your eye, but you couldn't really get a good picture. The warthog, the yellow-billed oxpecker, that's a little better picture. It was beautiful seeing these guys. The go-away bird is quite a big size bird, and I don't know why it's called go-away. And these little speckled mouse birds, they're the funniest little things to see. They hop around all over the place, but they weren't easy to find. Beautiful raptors, many, many different types of raptors when we were there. This was a good find too, the spotted eagle owl. It was very hard to see. The helmeted guinea fowl. I loved seeing these birds. They're very noisy, but they're a cool bird to see. When we were at the camp, we were greeted every time we came back from a trip. The women that were there would have piles of lemon scented cool cloths. We were so hot. And when you took the cloth and wiped your face, it was amazing. We actually were quite astounded and laughing at each other because of the dust that came off. It was like red rust dust all over us. Your arms, your face, your hair felt horrible. We did take a lot of showers, but it was so nice to have that. And because of that, of course, it meant that you had to drink a Kilimanjaro or a Safari beer afterwards. So now I just wanted to talk to you about the Maasai people. They're quite a group of people, and I was very respectful and amazed by what they could do and overcome, and living in that area for so many years. The Maasai, actually, I'll just go to the next slide, I think. They're the oldest Nilotic cultures, and it's known that they originated in Lake Turkana, which is in the southern part of Kenya, and they had migrated south to Tanzania in about the 15th century. The Maasai name derives from the people who speak Ma, a very strong and spirited language, and that was very evident when they were talking. Their population is over 1 million. And I think the last thing that I read, which was just a couple of days ago, it's 1.5 million. They live semi-nomadic lives. They move along with their grazing cattle and goat herds, and their life expectancy is only 45 years. It's one of the best recognized tribes because of their history with lions, their dancing, jumping, and their traditional dress. This was a group that I saw. It wasn't too long after I was coming from the airport. The very first person I saw was all dressed in red, didn't have quite as big a group, but this group was on the left-hand side. The first one I saw was on the right. How bizarre it was to see this sign when you see so many people walking miles with their animals. Can you imagine how difficult life would be if you really were in a wheelchair trying to be pushed over this terrain? Definitely, I did not see anyone with many physical disabilities. This was a group of women sitting on the side of the road waiting for a bus to take them to a modern town so they could purchase some things. I also did see many people waiting for hours after walking many miles with huge water containers. They were waiting for a water truck to come and fill their jugs. These trucks and the water are supplied by the local government to adjunct the drinking and cooking water for the Maasai. Climate change is making a devastating impact on these people and their fragile water supply. A Maasai, they greatly value their livestock and feel that the herd shows their wealth, but they do meet for trade and selling their livestock. And this is a meeting of such an occasion. Because I was so full of questions and wanting it all, and very interested in the culture of the area, I was asked by one of my guides if I would like to visit a Maasai village. This was not supposed to be part of the trip. He had told me that at supper time, if I had asked everyone and I could get at least one truck, which usually held about 5 or 6 people, plus our guide, that if I could get at least one truck, that he would arrange it with the chief the next day. He knew the chief of this village. So I'll tell you, when I asked at supper time, it was very interesting to see how many hands went up. So we went with 2 full trucks. We squeezed a few extra people in with us. When we got here, they were all standing waiting for us. They had tables all set out with their tourist trade. There was all kinds of things. There was beading, which the women do. There were bowls made of kisi stone, which is a very soft stone. I did bring a couple of them home, painted. They're carved out with traditional tools. The stone is very much like soapstone. They had jewelry, they made of cow horn. They had animals that were done in a lot of the acacia wood. Also, when we were at the tourist tables, we were told that we would be given a price in US dollars and that we were expected to barter. These men, when they were walking on the tracks, if you were making it very evident that you were taking pictures, they often would run down to the vehicle and demand money, because the tourist trade is so lucrative to them. But they were very elegant, wonderful people. In the village here, one of the ladies that decided to come with us, the elderly lady sitting here, she turned 89 years old, and she was very keen to do absolutely everything that she could possibly experience. She was called Bibi, which means grandmother, and was treated with the greatest of respect. When coming off the trucks, we were each given a piece of cloth or a piece of fabric, as you can see, called a shuka. It was to cover our shoulders. And surprisingly, it was so hot that day, it was very comfortable. And it actually wasn't hot at all. It made you feel cool. Again, just a picture of one of these guys dancing. It was cool that I caught him with his hair flying in the air. You can see the big thorn bushes in behind, and there was a big boma in the middle of this town. The beading that the women had done, all the hats that you can see there are beaded, and the collars are all beaded. The beading actually represents a tribe and status and sense of identity of the women. White was the meaning of purity and health, representing the cow's milk. And women do the beading to tell her story. Many of the purchases of the beadwork allow money for girls to have books to learn. Now, this was a huge privilege for me. While we were in the village, I had walked down to the very end of the village. There was an elderly gentleman that had come out, had a table with just 2 or 3 things on it. I was looking for a lion, but I had been told not to expect to find one because they do not carve lions or any type of predator, because that may pull them into their life and cause problems with their livestock. So after looking at the beautiful card pieces, I found this majestic lion right, like I said, at the very end. And the reason that this elder had been allowed to carve lion was because he had killed 2 lions in his life. One was his initiation to manhood and was a solo kill. The other one, I didn't hear very much about what had happened, why he had killed the lion. But because of his status in the village, he had carved the likeness of the predator, which was considered an ill omen. I was given the explanation because of his lion killing prowess, that he had the bravery to protect the people from a lion, because of this carving would evoke the predator into the village. This was the only one that I could find, and I felt very privileged to purchase this rarity. You can see that it's beautifully carved. A little bit of the beading in the background there. You can see again the beading of the women, and each color means something. In Maasai culture, it's considered to be rude to show your shoulders or your legs in the women. So unfortunately, that we didn't find out until after we had got there. So you can imagine what they thought of us. It was quite embarrassing, actually. Tire sandals. Very often between the big toe and the second toe, there's a spike that's beaded, and it has some sort of status symbol. Again, the beading. The women were quite beautiful. They demonstrated fire starting, not a match in sight, and these guys had that fire going within a few seconds. I was very privileged to have the chief's son inviting me into his home. And you can see on his sandals, actually, the spike. The chief's son talked about their culture, the status of the different classes, meaning age-wise, that's how the classes are shaped, their education and their health. He was very good at answering any of my questions. He told us about becoming a warrior at 16 with circumcision to bring a boy into manhood, then several years of tending the herds. That's what made him into a warrior. Women at the age of menstruation are still being circumcised, although he was proud to tell us that they were allowed to have it happen in a hospital under clean conditions as long as they did not use any drugs. You can see the entranceway. I didn't have to duck. He sat there and explained to us a lot of things. It was very surprising how eloquent he was. And he was the second oldest son of the chief. The oldest son had been allowed to go off to school. So I had asked him if he was going to be chief, and he just smiled. I was sitting in this spot. This was actually the children's bed. It was rawhide cow, and it was quite sandy. And I asked him about the sand, and he just smiled and said the wind. And it was stretched over poles on the ground. That's a look at how they weave the branches together for the roofs. And the small bed on this side is the couple's bed, actually. So certainly not king size. The huts are quite close together, mostly for protection. And it was surprising being inside, sitting there. It was so hot out that day, and the ever-present wind. And it was quite cool within the hut. And then this little building on the left, on the right here is their schoolhouse. It was about 200 yards from the town itself. These are all the wee kids that were inside the schoolhouse. Now the next slide has some text to it, but you're going to jump because the kids were singing to us. After I had taken that video, I turned the phone around and showed them the video, and all those kids were just slammed against my legs, looking at each other, laughing and giving themselves high fives. They were just thrilled to see themselves on video. Then I also was trying to explain to them through their teacher that I had come from a country that had a lot of cold going on right now. So I showed them a picture of my granddaughter with her long blonde hair and being tall and sitting in the snow with her dog. So their little eyes were just popped right open. They couldn't believe that I would live in such a country. So I'm sure you've had all the time to read there, the government schools that are located in the towns and cities. So the kids do travel back and forth if they can. If not, they stay at the government school. But there's only one child out of a family that is allowed to go. The father will pick a son or a daughter. Sometimes there's allowed two, depends on the status of the people. So that now many of the villages have had public education, providing future economic stability for their families. The religion of the Maasai is monotheist. Engai is their deity who manifests any guiding message in many different colors as signs to be interpreted by the head medicine leader. So if, say, the medicine leader saw that it was blue, then it would be interpreted in a certain way. The Maasai diet consists of types of bark, herbs, milk, some fresh, some fermented, blood and meat. Children are only fed with blood and milk with some herbs. Young women are allowed to have some meat to assist with healthy fertility, and the adults eat meat during ceremonies and special occasions. And most of the traditional Maasai, when they are raised, they have one tooth missing, and I think it's the one just behind the eye tooth, and that they take that tooth out specifically because if there is disease, tetanus for one, they can still be fed because they have the diet of milk and blood. And so everyone was missing one tooth, if you were raised traditionally. Cattle and goats are the ultimate wealth. They're given as bride prices, traded and sold at market in gatherings similar to Katie. They're considered the most important in their lives than anything else. They are having new ways of herding or being practiced by keeping livestock herded into a tight bunch and intermingled with zebra and wildebeest, therefore keeping the plains healthy. By consistently moving each week, the trampling, urine, and dung helps the grass to grow. It decreases desertification and improving the health and increasing the volume of water and streams in the overall environment. Bunching up each night into thorn bomas, and these are extremely difficult to get through, is our protection for lions. Maasai no longer hunt lions. It was the traditional rite of passage to manhood to solo kill a lion, but it stopped, but ritual killings sometimes do take place. This reflects the recent understanding of the role that lions play in the herbivore control and maintaining a healthy balance for their ecosystems. Also, lions bring in tourists. This is going to be a video for you. It's a little bit long and it's quite loud, and it was in one of the lodges that we stayed in. It just shows you their type of singing. One person starts, usually the leader starts, and then the rest come in with rhythm, and then the women come in and adjunct that. So these people were hired in that hotel. The Maasai men were all our guards. We were not allowed out at night at all without a guard with us. And the women work in the hotel. This piece behind you, behind the Ngorongoro crater and Serengeti sign, is a piece that is done by the Maasai with wax. And it's quite beautiful, but the material is quite stiff also. So on we go. This was just outside a tourist area. It was a huge building inside with all kinds of things, but the artwork was phenomenal. This statue, I gave you two views of it so you could see a little bit more, but it was about 12 feet high and it was all hand carved. And then once we had a quick look around here, we were up to the spectacular climb up to the crater and the trip down into the bowl. And as you can see, the trees in the background there that you can see, the yellow, is the acacia trees, and that's where the wild bees are. That's where they like to build their hives, and that's where the Maasai take the honey that helps them be sold for money and to adjunct their diet. These two girls, it was thrilling to see them. It was quite a hot day. Both of them were panting like crazy, and you can see how full their bellies were. A little Thompson gazelle, we saw lots of those. This girl, she just pranced in front of our truck, flopped down into this big puddle, and just sat there and was panting. I'll tell you, I could reach out the side window and touch her if I had the nerve. You can see the type of vehicles we were in. The top popped up and the front came off and our windows opened up. We were lucky enough actually to watch wildebeest birth. Puddles absolutely everywhere, little ponds and puddles. All kinds of bird life and lots of water bird life too. We were just on the verge of the rainy season, so the grasses were coming in full bloom. This Cory bustard, it stands about 40 centimeters high, I think it is. It's quite high. Two of the big five, Cape buffalo and the black rhino. These guys were all over the place, beautiful sound. The common and the common golden actually, and the black-backed jackal. Now, this was when we had traveled over many miles of dry riverbed, had come back up, partially up the side of the crater. This camp is a tented camp and it's only there for a few months. And you have to book way, way in advance in order to get into these camps. The Ndutu camp, they really are just tents. And I really wasn't afraid at all until about my second night. I got up to go to the indoor bathroom. We weren't allowed outside, and decided to open the flap at the back of the tent. We were Velcroed in every night, basically. Our Maasai warriors zipped us up completely at bedtime and patrolled all night, keeping us safe. I decided to open the flap up to peek outside when I heard a lion roaring very close. Sounded like right outside the walls. Ever have the hair on your legs stand up like the hair on the back of your neck? I slapped that flap back down and hopped into bed with Capstick's quote going off in my head. Perhaps an hour went by, a hell of a long time when you're sitting in the dark wondering if something big and hairy is going to burst through the walls of your hut. You will likely recall the sensation from your childhood camping trips. There were the usual sounds of insects, the wet swirls of catfish and crocs on the river, the honking of hippos and the sleepy chatter of Amazonic baboons in the grove of fever trees over the ridge. Then somehow, with prehistoric certainty, I knew he was there, very close. I could absolutely sense him. The hackles were crawling around on my neck like a nest of maggots, and my palms were slippery cold. In a low, hunched, shouldered crouch, he slinked towards the rear of the darkened hut, his huge paws soundless against the packed red clay. Flattened to the ground, he crept to the open space and froze into tawny stone. Now, those are the sorts of things that I read before I came. Now, I'm going to show you what I heard almost every night. Now you know why there was some nights that were very sleepless. This was inside our tent. You can see the floor and everything was all this plasticized canvas. They were very elegant for being in a tent. Glamping. Oh, sorry. The staff in our dining tent, this was the night that BB was turning 89. They had baked her a birthday cake. There was lots of drinks flowing, and they take any opportunity to sing and dance. It was absolutely wonderful. Isn't this woman gorgeous with her goats? And look at the background. But I used to feel sorry for myself bringing in wood. Can you imagine bringing this in? Another shot of us looking. You can see the sky. It was starting to get dark then. That's me in the straw hat. This is our group. And if you can believe it, I was almost the youngest. And you see that little pool behind us, which is only, what, 30 yards away? It was full of hippos. So we were actually kind of foolish standing that close. Blue wildebeest are new. These guys actually get a very, very contagious respiratory illness. Any of the groups that we saw, there was no coughing or anything, but if they get this illness, they become very weak. They die in the thousands. And when you see them, they have mucus dripping out of their face, out of their noses and stuff, and they die fairly quickly. But we saw nothing of that whatsoever. And we did see a calf being born. This was just at the very top when we had climbed up the side of the crater. Another view of the crater. It was fantastic. It's 19 kilometers in width and 16 kilometers in length, 610 meters deep, and the surface bottom covers 265 kilometers squared. So it's huge. This was at the Sopa Lodge, an absolutely beautiful spot. We all had our own cabins. There was rooms upstairs and rooms downstairs, huge, big glassed-in balconies. It was an absolutely beautiful place. Now, this was at the top of the ridge where a lot of tourists stopped because you could see the whole Ngorongoro crater. And in the background, you can see in the left-hand side, the guards. And then I took a close-up of them so that some of my friends at home here could see that these guys were not fooling around. Those are AK-47s. Olduvai Ridge, where the first hominid artifact was found by Lewis. I said Richard. Richard was his brother, but it actually was Lewis and Mary Leakey. And we went through the a couple of the sites. We could see where some of the digs had happened, and there was a big museum there. So it was phenomenal to see that for history of humans. The Nunmakwa dove, she's the sound of the African plains. I'm just going to play you a little bit of what she sounds like. And it's quintessential now that you hear it, if I can ever find my cursor. Well, there it is. When you hear it, you will recognize it now, so that every African thing you see, you'll hear this. Sorry. There we go. Another view of the crater. This guy is actually quite big. He was just out in a dry riverbed. We did get to see a lot of lion. Now, I should have maybe said at the first, like the things that come up on television, that there's explicit sex. So if you don't want to watch that, you can turn away, but I will be showing you this. We were so fortunate to be able to find this. Now, if I can just get my cursor, there we go. Okay. Turn away now. This pair will actually stay together for quite a length of time. And apparently with lion, there is a hormone that she produces once she's pregnant. And then once she knows she's pregnant, that stops the mating. Those are marabou storks up in the tree. You'd wonder how a bird so big could get up that high, but they do. This was actually 3 brothers that were hiding in the bushes, both for comfort to get out of the heat, but it was very good ambush. By the time we saw this cheetah, one of the other trucks that happened to be on the track with us put out a call, and within 20 minutes of us sitting there watching this cheetah, there had to have been 50 cars on the track. They were all jostling. Some of them went down into the ditch, tipped over. There was mud everywhere. It was quite the thing. Can you imagine this poor cat trying to hunt? Like I said, a lot of raptors. Now, I have a little story about the dung beetle. You saw that our trucks had the tops open. and our windows were wide open. There was all kinds of flies coming in and out, biting us and that sort of thing, especially the tsetse fly, which was awful. But I was lucky enough to get a dung beetle land right on my knee. So it running up and down my leg, and I finally did throw it back out the window. But if you think we're using a lot of sanitizer now, you should have seen what I used. Spit bath. Tons of birds that we saw. We did checklists every night. I can't remember the exact number, but I think the amount of birds we saw was something in the 300 range in 2 weeks. So that was pretty good. You can see this golden jackal, how well he hides, even out in plain sight. One of my favorites. I'm going to read you about what I had read. Oh, and you can see the marabou stork in that tree behind. But the Cape buffalo, and this is from Capstick's book. He has enjoyed a Jack the Ripper reputation for at least 300 years, being considered a top contender for the most dangerous animal of the big five. Most impressive fact about the Cape buffalo is that he has virtually no weak points. Jumbo and rhino are myopic in the extreme, but a bull buffalo could read a want ad in dim across Times Square. The talent of his big, scruffy, thorn-torn ears is incredible. Fully the equal of a lion and a leopard, either of which he outweighs by many times, but at no apparent cost in blinding speed and maneuverability. His sense of smell is practically supernatural when he sticks that big black nose into the wind, as good as any elephant or rhino, and much better in ambient air than any cat. This is where I really felt my trip. Our guides took us directly through the grasslands, thousands of animals parting right in front of us, just loping away from us as we're going through. You could reach out and touch them. It was fantastic. And this is what I say when that's the feeling of Africa. We were never allowed out of our vehicles. When we were in the park, that was it. We were to stay inside the vehicles, with the exception of one day. Everybody had to go to the bathroom, and it was a carload of women that day. And there was no happy place around. That's what our guides called any washrooms. So not like a pit stop on the side of the road when there's a chance that there's something with really big teeth and long saber claws, thinking of your big white behind, looks like a ham. Marabou, he's almost as tall as me, and most of you know how tall I am. He wasn't the least concerned that we were taking pictures of him. He'd move away, or we would move away to get further away from him, and he would just come closer. Can you imagine having these little guys floating around like the European starlings that we have? I think he was scenting the air. A lion. This place was gorgeous. It was very sensational swimming in that infinity pool, going right up to the end with the water splashing down over the side, and watching wildebeest and gazelle trot along underneath you. One of our rooms in the shower, which was outside, that was glorious. Now, I do have to tell you a wee story about that. You see the entranceway there. When we were coming out one night, I, of course, was one of the last persons out because we were doing our checklists. Our Maasai guide just stepped right up in behind you, would stand a little bit in front of you and just walk along with you to your cottage. And when he did step in front of me, both of us kind of stopped. He looked around, just kind of nodded his head. Another Maasai warrior came directly up behind me, so I was kind of sandwiched between the two of them. And I had this very eerie feeling of something watching us. I asked him what it was. He said, a hyena over there. And I looked over and here's two big eyes looking at me very close. It was probably 50 yards, which in the blink of an eye, if he had have wanted, he could have got me, no problem. So I was extremely happy to be sandwiched by these two Maasai warriors with their spears. I wasn't in that cottage, I was in the next one. And there's the spears. And they mean business. These little guys are actually the closest relatives to elephant. And there's the two different types there, and they were everywhere, and they were not afraid of you. We did see a lot of elephant. I think the biggest group I saw was about 50. This was a mother and her 3 cubs. They were kind of camped out in behind those trees, just keeping cool, but there was a little spring there. And they are famous for their tree climbing lions. We sat for about 20 minutes waiting for the mom to climb up. She called to her cubs. They kind of melted out of the grass and came up one by one. And as they climbed the tree, each one had to move to a different limb so the next one could get up. They were about 15 feet up above, which was certainly much cooler for them because of the breeze. It gave them a huge advantage to spot their prey. That wasn't my picture, that was Glenn's. The one prior to that, that one was mine. The secretary bird. We were kind of lucky to see these. They're a little bit hard to find sometimes. You usually only see them walking. They are raptors of the sub-Sahara grasslands, savannas, and scrublands. You will only see them fly to get to their nests or in a courtship display. And they stand about 4 feet tall, and I'm 4'11". Oh, and when we came across the rivers, we were also excited to see these hippos, watched them for quite a little while. It had rained the night before, and the area that we were sitting in, it took our drivers at least 20 minutes to get out of. We were slipping and sliding, and it was terrible to try and get out of that. Then as we were driving along, we came over a bridge that was washed out, so we just drove right ahead through it. And the smell was horrendous. But because of the hippos, it keeps that river system perfect. But it's the manure that they flick around with their tail and stay in the water. So you knew when you were coming across hippos. Nile crocodile. Hitching a ride on mom. These guys were cool. Strangest face you ever saw. A lot of topi, which are kind of a favorite of the lion. She didn't look like she was too worried, but they were very thin. This was the beginning of the rainy season, so the herds were just starting to come in, and a lot of the lion we saw were very thin. tons of birds. I was in my glory. And I was getting really pretty quick finding them in my bird book too. This, I'm just going to show you a little bit. It's a video of the types of tracks that we were on. Oh, again, I can't find my cursor. There we go.
Some Western bar after this trip.
No kidding. The heck with doing all the crunches and the ab workouts and crazy wind too, eh? This was one of our guides, Gaddy. You can see by our vehicles the type of tract that we were on. He is a Maasai, but he was raised in the city with his father, who is a pastor. So he did not have a tooth missing, but he did have a wife and children, but he had a few wives actually. A great guy. He was a fantastic birder. Shaba. We all loved him. He was hilarious. He was jovial. He was extremely interested in teaching us all Swahili. Dennis was a guy of culture. He wanted us to go away with the feeling of the culture of the Serengeti and the culture of Ngorongoro. Told us many stories about the animals that were there. He was extremely knowledgeable. Ah, now you see my feet. If you can see those purple marks, I have to tell you about this. If any of you have traveled, you know that you have to take something for malaria. It's called Plaquenil, is what I had taken. And I'll just go back. You see those purple marks? I couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with my feet. They hurt so much just one day. And I thought maybe my sandals were bothering me, maybe my running shoes, but the pain was incredible. And as those purple marks got a bit older, they all became blisters. The blisters started on my hands, then soon my legs. It was creeping up my legs up to my thigh. I felt a little unwell. It was difficult to drink because I had blisters in my mouth. I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So like any good nurse, I was going through all the history, trying to figure out what the heck it was. And I realized it was the Plaquenil that I was taking for malaria. You have to take it a week before you go, and you have to take it 10 days after you come back, and you take it continuously while you're away. So this, once I looked it up on my phone, then I realized I had all the side effects. So I had to stop taking it. And I was 3 weeks in by that time, so I figured I was safely covered. So be careful about what you take. There's many other preparations on the market. Ah, finally my leopard. This was my shot. This was Glenn's shot. And we found it the last day that we were at the Serengeti. You can just see him if I go back here. You can see him if I can find my cursor again. There it is. There's his tail and the hind leg, and you can see his body right here. Now I could see him quite well with my binoculars, but that's a much better shot. And that was a 600 zoom, I believe. My ever-loving Guinea Fowl, as she's sitting up there, she was screaming her head off. And it was so loud, but I don't think she realized that the more she was yelling, telling everybody to be away and be the alarm, that she was the one that was pulling them in. Lots of raptors. Lots of little fellas, those little red-headed rock agamas, they were awesome to watch. This serval, we were watching her hunting, actually. The shot on the left is Glenn's with his camera. The shot on the right is with my iPhone. So I was pretty happy with that phone. this is us packing up. You can see we're all loaded. Our luggage is a little bit ahead of us there. Small little planes. Some of the bigger people that were in our trip were absolutely dying on those planes because the seats were probably 12 inches wide. It was about 100 degrees in the plane, and we were in it for about an hour and a bit getting back to Arusha. So this was them. I was separated from my group. They all got to sit together in the airport, and I was sitting across from them taking pictures of them. And leaving my group to head home, I flew on from Kilimanjaro Airport to Zanzibar for a week, surrounded by the Indian Ocean, spices, and a different culture. And unfortunately, people, that's pretty much the end of my time. So I will be doing Zanzibar in another presentation, and it will take me about an hour, and I'll take you through all the spices. I wished it could be live because I would be making things for you with those spices. And that's the end. So I'll stop screen sharing now. Okay, do I have any questions at all?
Pam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.